Aouar and Partey. The names rumble on as we come to the close of the 2020 summer window, and I am no less stressed, it seems. In fact, arguably more. But hopefully, something that can de-stress me is talking to someone about it and mainly putting the stress on them, which is the most enjoyable thing on life, when you can remove some of your own stress onto someone else. So let's crack on with that. Mr. James Benge, how are we doing, mate?
I am exhausted. I was, as soon as the news broke in France, I've been pretty much on the phone constantly ever since, and before, just trying to work out, it just feels like months of trying to work out what is going on with Arsenal's midfield, where is the money coming from, who's going, and it feels like it was always destined for this huge crescendo where there's half a dozen players they want to sell and a couple they want to sign, and it's about to be a very stressful 9 days, half of which I'm going to be spending in Liverpool to add to the confusion and chaos.
Yeah, I suppose, and usually you'd think of, Liverpool's quite nice, but with the situation we're in right now, you can't even, it's not even the greatest time to be
Liverpool.
Yes. Well, hopefully there's a nice view for you, but no, I completely empathise with you. Exhaustion is about where it's at. Pumping out daily videos. I mean, last night when the Aouar news dropped, I put out a video and I got a little bit excited. I mean, Vinny Eagle in the chat box points that out, saying I got a little too excited maybe last night doing the video on Aouar. But talking kind of in the field, what was your initial reaction when you saw it in regards to sort of the news that Aouar had agreed the deal with Arsenal and that we were supposedly putting in this formal bid? Were you kind of happy? I was happy initially to realise that it was going on, but also there was a second avenue to, does this have an impact on the Partey side of things? So what was your sort of initial reaction to it?
I mean, well, as ever, as a journalist, your initial reaction when someone else has got a story ahead of you is
no,
or words to that effect, and then hitting the phones and trying to find out what you can. It made sense. I think the direction of travel, from what I've heard, has been more towards Aouar. He's Arteta's man. He's someone that Arteta really likes, and so therefore it wasn't a huge surprise. I think we've always got to say, with personal terms being agreed, that's never the obstacle for a team like Arsenal and a transfer like this. Arsenal will, if they like a player enough, they are able to match all but the most exorbitant of salaries. I mean, take aside your Lionel Messi's, and Arsenal can pretty much afford to match their salary if they think he's the right player. So I don't think there's any great surprise that personal terms are agreed and that won't be an issue. It's really about doing the deal with Lyon. And again, I think one of the things is it actually all feels quite feasible. The challenge is trying to work out how this and the Partey situation mesh together. I know that Arsenal would like both. I honestly don't know how possible that is. There's not £100 million lying around to pay for both without players being sold or players moving on. I remember talking to Vinay Venkatacham at the start of the month.
Yeah,
he was talking about, look, if we know the money's coming in future windows, then we can potentially spend it now. And that's why you see sort of Torreira, I'm told Arsenal will be pretty willing to accept an obligation to pay down the line from Atletico or Torino or whoever. It's a really tough one to work out because there is still interest in Partey. It's just going to come down to striking the right balance, and I still think it will be a binary decision. I may be wrong, but I think that they will have to choose between Aouar and Partey, and where you think that money should go. It seems like there is an awful lot of debate, and understandably, because they're two completely different players.
They are massively different, and like the article that I put out today was kind of about how I see Aouar as kind of a continuation of the norm for Arsenal, these smaller, technical, good dribblers, good passers, creative in the final third. And throughout kind of the Wenger era, we had obviously we started out with Cesc Fabregas replacing Patrick Vieira, and that was kind of when the biggest shift sort of happened. And then we carried on signing players like Hleb and Denilson and Nasri, and then Santi Cazorla towards the end of things. And then Unai Emery took over, and even though we signed a defensive player, Lucas Torreira was still a diminutive, small, technical player on the ball, and he could break up play really well, but wasn't the physical presence that Arsenal have really needed since, well, firstly, Vieira, and secondly, Abu Diaby's major injury problem. So if I was to ask you straight down the line, who would you prefer? Who would you go for?
I'd go for Aouar. I completely agree with everything you said, and it's very convincing. But I look at Partey as he's older. There's no resale value. His release clause has to be paid upfront in full. I don't think there's an issue with taxes, but I would need to double check that as well. So it's a straight down, money down investment at a time when you need a bit of liquidity. Aouar's younger. I look at Arsenal as well, and I think Arteta can organise this defence. It might mean a back three. I don't think we're going towards the back four anytime just yet, although it is obviously a back four in possession and a back three in defence. And the biggest problem I've seen in this Arsenal team is the lack of a killer pass in the final third. And I don't want to talk about Mesut Ozil. I think Houssem Aouar provides that. You look at his assist numbers, you look at his performances in the Champions League. He's someone that might be able to prise open a low block. And that just seems like the one area right now that this Arsenal squad doesn't quite have. Ceballos better from deep, Xhaka better from deep. In an ideal world, you'd have both. And I think it would also be great to keep around someone like Torreira, so that you do have someone that can play that more defensive-minded role. But that's not going to happen. Not if you want to sign these players. So, I mean, I can be convinced to sign Partey, but I just think he's probably more the profile of player. But I think in terms of the specifics, I would go for Aouar.
Okay, well, let me try. And then I'll get your thoughts on sort of where my head's at regarding Partey. Let me transport you back to the Leicester game at the end of last season at home, where Arsenal were 1-0 up and then were kind of camped in their own half as Leicester continuously pressed us. And eventually that pressure told. The high press is something that I feel that Arsenal, in addition to what you were pointing out of central creativity, beating the low block and getting that incisive pass into the killer players that we've got up front. But Arsenal's ability to kind of beat the high press in our own half, in itself, I felt makes us less creative because we can create less frequent. We create chances less frequently, and Partey's ability to kind of take the ball from his own final third into the opposition's final third so consistently is the reason why I kind of look at him as a transformative, is the word that I see myself and a lot of other people using at the moment. That kind of transformative figure. Now, speaking to the likes of, say, Jeremy Smith, who I don't know if you're aware of, or the other people are aware of, that Jeremy's very good with his French football when he's writing for like GFFN, I should say, talks about Aouar as a slight issue in terms of his consistency, and in terms of when Lyon aren't playing particularly well, he's not the character to kind of drag them up to his level, and actually he's kind of a player to dip to the level of the team. Now, that might be down to the situation of Lyon. It might not be anything to do necessarily with Aouar, but hearing that kind of thing about him does concern me. So how does that make you feel regarding those two still?
You put together a really convincing case.
It's my job. It's what I do. If you put on your neutral observer hat or your, I can see Arsenal improving with either of those players. And I can also see the need for both. Arsenal have kind of at the moment a midfield of a lot of players who pass the ball quite neatly out to the flanks from deep, and you need someone who carries the ball. And I think Aouar will do that in a different way. He won't take it from across the whole middle third of the pitch, but if Xhaka and Ceballos find him deep, he can be the one that advances it, through from central midfield to the final third. I just don't know. I think in an ideal world, you kind of want to go into the Premier League and find these players because that then they suit this league. Obviously, the challenge then is that they cost 100 million, and they're way out of your depth. I just think if Partey doesn't work out, you end up burdened with a big money contract and no resale value at all. And there are very few players in this Arsenal squad who have significant resale value. I think Aouar, even if it's not quite right, I think a lot of people would look at that and hit a player like him and go, well, not well suited for the Premier League,
You know, we're PSG, we're Inter Milan. Let's have a look at him, and he could do great things. So I think it ends up becoming not about so much about the player as the specifics of the deal, and that's why I still lean a little bit towards Aouar.
Yeah, I think your mindset is very much where mine was, I would imagine, probably about 2 months ago. And I was putting out videos where I was saying Partey's the wrong choice. Like looking at him and going, we need to buy players with sell-on value. We've done this mistake over and over again. You look at Lacazette, you look at Aubameyang, and whilst Aubameyang specifically is amazing for us, we had to get him to sign this new deal. And if he hadn't have signed this new deal, it would have been catastrophic for the club to possibly have a player of his quality with the amount of goals that he brings us with only 1 year left on his deal, and then arguably leaving for either nothing or leaving immediately for a very reduced fee of what his actual value is. But I completely take on those points, and situationally it makes complete sense to then go for a younger player that could have much greater sell-on value down the line. I mean, in a perfect world, we both hope that both of them happens, but we're just going to have to wait and see for that. You brought up part of this about kind of the players that if both was to happen, that Arsenal would definitely need to move players on. Do you think with 9 days left, as we've mentioned, Arsenal are now in a position where clubs could come in to look to take advantage of this scenario and say the players that are in my mind that Arsenal are going to get let go, like Torreira, Mustafi, possibly Kolasinac, Socrates, these types of players, especially with the homegrown quota being overstocked right now, even before someone comes in. Do you think Arsenal could see players leave for significantly reduced fees than we may have done, say, had they been sold a month ago?
Yes. Now, ultimately, Arsenal can't make anyone bid for anyone. I think that's the thing you've got to kind of bear in mind, because, you know, I see my notifications is full of people going, why have these players not been sold? Well, there have to be interested clubs. I was talking to people close to one of the three you've mentioned. I'm not going to give away which one. He just sort of said, I'm not expecting anything to happen until the final few days of the window. Yeah. We know where we are. There is interest in those three in particular. Kolasinac from Leverkusen. Mustafi has got 3 teams in Italy and a few elsewhere. And Torreira, we all know about Atleti and Torino. But it just doesn't make sense to strike that deal right now if you're any of those buying clubs. Better to wait until later in the window and give Arsenal the choice, basically, of you can have nothing for this player that you don't really want, or you can have what we've got on offer here. It's something that Arsenal always get criticised for. It's hard to sell well. I think sometimes it's about, you know, the easiest thing is extracting good value from good players. These aren't players that, you know, Lazio have alternatives if they can't get Mustafi. Bayer Leverkusen would like Kolasinac, but I don't particularly get the feeling that their season will fall apart if they don't get him. Same with Torreira. You know, these aren't top grade players that you're selling, and therefore there's not a hugely pressing need from buying clubs to get them in right away, because they're going to transform. They're going to transform their club. So it's tough. I would think those three will go eventually. Socrates probably. I don't think that's quite as clear cut as people think. Guendouzi, it's not really moved along very much.
It's a funny scenario with Guendouzi, isn't it? Because we kind of made him unsellable in a way. It's to the point where his attitude was so publicly talked about that what club is going to come in with a serious offer at this stage?
I have to be very clear that absolutely none of the stuff that myself and other people reported about Guendouzi came out from the club. The club have been very careful to not let these stories slip out there. You know, it's obviously our job as journalists to get that information out there. But this is not, you know, the club are not publicly or privately, to my knowledge at least, criticising Guendouzi, questioning his attitude in training. It comes from elsewhere.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. I mean, the other player of that scenario is, I suppose we should talk about, is Mesut Ozil. You can't really not talk about him right now. Both him and Guendouzi not in the squad for the Carabao Cup game, which surprised a lot of people, considering Ozil, of course, played in that pre-season friendly at the Emirates behind closed doors. Are you expecting any kind of movement in the 9 days that are left regarding him, or are you kind of expecting him? And I suppose then the next question is, with that being a no, is that do you expect him to play again for Arsenal still this season?
I expect him to not play again. I'm not saying he won't, because this is Arsenal and it's incredibly unpredictable. and there is still a lot of football left to be played. But look, I can't say everything that's going on with Mesut Ozil because I don't know. The only thing that Arsenal have said is that he's not training well enough. In theory, that's within his power to train. Now, we can speculate at length about, no one ever really thought of Ozil as a great trainer earlier in his career, and no one ever, even when Arteta came into the side, was he that much better a trainer then than he is now? I don't know, but look, he's been very public. He's not going until his contract ends. Arsenal don't really they don't really see a huge amount of value in building around a player that's going to leave at the end of next season. I would say, if you're playing games where you're playing a number 10, obviously if Aouar comes in, he's the natural choice for that position. But even then, would you not be better looking at Willock, maybe Smith Rowe if he doesn't go out on loan? And I think Aouar might force him out. That was something I kind of reported a few months back, more related to Coutinho at the time. But they're the players that you should be investing development opportunities in, and the EFL Cup is a development cup. It wouldn't shock me if we see him in an Arsenal shirt again, but every single week I don't think I'll be putting him in my predicted team. So I think he may have played his last game.
A couple of quick ones just before we wrap things up. Someone that you did put in your predicted team for the Leicester game, William Saliba, didn't feature and hasn't featured yet. And I know that Arsenal fans like their new toys, it's fair to say, and they like to see them played with. And Saliba so far isn't being played with at all. I'm trying to get past the image that I put myself in my head there. But in terms of Saliba, are you kind of expecting to come in when the Europa League kicks off rather than these Premier League fixtures?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a bit of a shame that Arsenal are playing Liverpool in the EFL Cup, because I think that may well have been the other option. It is a shame. Arteta spoke about this last week and said he's taking it slowly. Saliba's had a lot of injury problems. He's obviously still growing into his body. So they'll take time. I think he may play some more youth team games as well. That wouldn't shock me. But they'll ease him in. And also if he played, it wouldn't shock me if he played at Anfield in the League Cup. It's just going to be take it easy. There's no rush here. He's a good young player, but he's still only 18.
And last one is Reece Nelson, of course, is so far now looking down the pecking order. You've got now Willian and Pepe in that same right wing. I know Nelson can play on the other side, but you're looking at Aubameyang and going, he's not getting in there, really, is he? So, would you think that a loan deal for him is what the club want, and also what the club would like is for him to still remain part of the squad in the long term, and that's why a loan is preferable?
Yeah, absolutely. That's spot on. I know that he didn't really, early in the summer, he wasn't very keen on the idea of going out on loan. I think then reality strikes. It's kind of quite clear to him now that his best development option is to play week in, week out. And Arsenal would sort of echo that. So from what I'm told, this was something that was presented to Nelson by Arsenal as opposed to the other way around. There's very early days. I don't think there's even any offers in for him yet, because it's just it came together, I think, after the West Ham game. So it's one where they will take their time to work out the right landing spot. I'm sure there are teams in the Premier League where he would go into the starting 11 week in, week out. Same's true in Europe as well. He's still a good player. I thought he was actually really good against Leicester in midweek. I'd want to persevere with him. I spoke on the Arscast as well. The same thing with Joe Willock. Yeah. He's played 20, 21. You give them, you need to see how they cope with regular football. Keep developing them now. Now's not the time to move on from someone like Nelson. Definitely loan him out, see where he's at a year's time. Long term, I just don't know. Saka and Pepe and Martinelli, that's a lot of players ahead of him in the pecking order already. But, I'm looking forward to see how he does playing week in, week out somewhere else.
Yeah, fingers crossed that he does find that loan that suits him and he gets that time. Things look so sprightly at the beginning of his time in Germany and then kind of trailed off towards the end. And it was a shame. And had he have played kind of under Nagelsmann consistently, and there were rumours about that possibly being to do with his behaviour in training and sort of externally rather than what was happening on the pitch. So it'd be interesting to see if a loan does materialise. Rydog in the chat was pointing out that the loan market extends beyond this 9 days left of the window.
Oh, I struggle now. I just sort of see that.
I'm not sure what the details are. I think he said continentally. So say if he wasn't moved on by the end of these 9 days, he could still see a club from Europe come in for him at that point.
A lot of clubs in Europe really like Nelson. In January, Bayer Leverkusen tried to sign him on loan. And in the summer of 1920. So there is a lot of admiration for Nelson out there in Europe. I'm sure he will get a loan move. It's just about picking the right one.
100%. Thank you, James, for coming on today and taking up some of your time this afternoon. Could you tell people where they can find you and what you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, obviously you can read all our stuff on football.london and on Twitter, I'm at James Benge. Probably need to start doing one of these YouTube channels, but Charles Watts would just have stolen the idea.
Yes. If you are checking out Charles' stuff, please do. Charles loves these in the know people on Twitter as well. I'm enjoying watching Charles' reaction to some of these guys. It's brilliant. Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Right, thank you, James. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. There was some stuff going out for our members this morning as well. So if you'd like to join up and help support the channel, you can just do that by clicking the link in the description. We'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.